everyone. Welcome to the first Wits End live stream event. While we wait for a few more people to join in, if you're on here, if you could just leave us a hi so we can see that your comments are coming through. Uh, okay. And while we wait, I just wanted to give a little information about Wits End. Wits End was founded by Kathy Ballinger and Sandy Klein after both their lives were impacted by cancer. They both learned the importance of a cancer resource center that plays in the wellness in all those touched by cancer. They set out to bring all those services here to Worcester and the surrounding areas. I joined Wits End in 2020 when Wits End partnered with Worcester Community Hospital. We offer emotional support, practical education, and other services to all those touched by cancer. Looks like I'm seeing comments. Thank you all for joining us. So this week we are talking about nutrition before cancer and healthy eating. Remember, you can leave comments and questions in the comment box, and we will get to those throughout the interview. So at this time, I'm going to bring Jackie into the interview and introduce her to all of you. Hi, Jackie. How you doing?
Hi, Kat.
Thanks for joining us. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Jackie Hacker, and I am one of the registered dietitian nutritionists at the hospital. I primarily do outpatient work, which means that I meet with on appointments with anyone who has any medical issues, and I also am the dietitian that predominantly sees our oncology patients.
Okay, cool. So, what is the difference between a nutritionist and a registered dietitian nutritionist?
That is a very good question. Thanks for asking that. Um, we hear nutritionists out there in the public press a lot, but there is a big difference in how the public is protected. A registered dietitian is one who goes to school, and at the end of the dietetic, the nutrition schooling, an undergrad or a graduate degree, then sits for an internship and a rotation, hours, if you will, similar to what a doctor would do with a residency. We have 1,200 hours that we rotate around into different practice areas. At the end of that residency, we have to sit for a federal exam. Registered. I'm frozen. There
Oh,
I am.
there you are.
So after we sit for that registered exam and we pass it, then we're considered a registered dietitian, that federal exam. In the state of Ohio, we also have to have licensure. So I have to, as a registered dietitian, I have to keep up with continuing education. I have to keep my license current. And if you are a nutritionist, you have none of those standards. So anybody can call themselves a nutritionist. I've met a lot and read of a lot of good nutritionists, good work. However, there's no standard like there is for a registered dietitian. They don't have to have licensure. They don't have to have continuing education requirements. They don't have to pass any exam for basic knowledge. They can just say, hey, I like food and I study food and I'm a nutritionist. I can help you. As a registered dietitian, I can go into hospitals, dialysis centers. I can do what they call medical nutrition therapy and work with people with medical issues under my licensure. A nutritionist is not able to do that. They certainly could, but the public is not protected in knowing what they get.
Okay. So, as a registered dietitian, what does being nutritious or eating healthy, what does that actually mean?
Okay. So it's another good question because everybody thinks that they know food because we all eat. But the bottom line is that we are only as healthy as our cells. and our cells are only as healthy as what we feed them. So if I live on a diet of potato chips and pop and Twinkies and hot dogs, then my cells don't get the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that they need for my overall health. So if I can eat a healthy diet, balanced food groups, then I have a better chance, a better shot at making sure that I keep my health for as long as possible.
Okay. So what types of foods are good for people, to remain healthy and nutritious?
Okay. So, Kat, I think you have a file, the plate visual that we can pull up now.
Okay. Let's bring that up.
So when I talk about the 5 food groups, Kat's going to show us a picture of those 5 food groups.
Oh, that's not it.
And what we're talking about are non-starchy vegetables, proteins, starches and grains, fruit, and milk.
Okay.
And so
Here's our
if
plate.
we think about that, if we think about that plate as the plate visual, when we go ahead and we plate our food, or we stand in the kitchen and think about what am I going to serve for dinner, or we go shopping and we put things in the grocery cart, or we're in a restaurant and we're trying to order off of a menu, if you keep that plate visual in mind, half of what you eat should be non-starchy vegetables, a quarter starches and grains, and a quarter proteins.
Okay.
Sometimes it's hard to get non-starchy vegetables in every meal. So like breakfast, if we're typically cereal eaters, unless you're going to have maybe eggs with sauteed mushrooms and onions and peppers and a piece or two of toast, it's going to be hard to balance that plate like that. So in that case, step back and look at those 5 food groups, and predominantly the 3. We'll talk about the other 2 in a second here. But those food groups, and think about everything you eat in a given day. If it were piled high on a plate, half of it should be non-starchy vegetables, a quarter protein, and a quarter starches and grains. So if you haven't had any non-starchy vegetables at breakfast, maybe lunch becomes more than 50%, a chef salad with chicken and croutons. Or your mid-morning snack or your mid-afternoon snack becomes vegetables, non-starchy vegetables. So, Kat, I have a question for you.
Yes.
If I say non-starchy vegetables, what comes to mind?
Things
Non-starchy.
like non-starchy. Things like carrots and celery, and cucumbers.
Yeah, perfect. Peppers, mushrooms, summer squash, onions, perfect. If I say non-starchy vegetables, that also means that there are starchy vegetables. And so that's that 25% of the plate. If I say starchy vegetables, what comes to mind?
Things like potatoes and cauliflower, maybe.
Cauliflower is actually a non-starchy vegetable.
Oh, okay.
So the difference you can tell is if you get a mouthful of a vegetable like a potato, it has a mashed potato feel in your mouth, and those are the starchy vegetables. So you find it in potatoes, both white and sweet. You find it in corn. You find it in green peas, not snow peas. Those are non-starchy, but green peas. You find it in all of the winter squashes, acorn, butternut, pumpkin, spaghetti, those squashes that store up sugar over the summer to carry themselves through the winter. So those are considered the starchy vegetables. In addition to starchy vegetables, that 25% also includes the grains. So pastas that are made from grain, rice, our breads. So that makes up that 25%. The other thing I'd like to point out is that 25% of protein, we have to think bigger than just animal protein. So we've got foods that are good sources of protein that aren't necessarily animal meat. Can you think of any?
Fish.
Oh. Perfect. Animal meat.
Protein, non-animal meats. Drawing a blank.
How about eggs?
Eggs.
Eggs, cheese,
Okay.
Greek yogurt, great source of protein that isn't necessarily an animal meat. So we actually get protein from every food group, not so much fruit unless it's prepared with some dairy, but we get protein in most of, the other food groups.
Okay. We have a couple of people saying nuts and beans. Are those
Yes,
other things?
yes, absolutely. Nuts and nut butters, walnuts, walnut butter, almond butter, peanut butter, seeds, sunflower seeds, good sources of protein. And
Awesome.
beans, like your chili beans, your black beans, your kidney beans, good sources of protein, but they are a starchy vegetable because if you get a full mouthful of them,
Hmm.
you're going to have that mashed potato feel in your mouth.
So is that why there's a big trend now that people are going to things like cauliflower rice instead of rice and potatoes, like cauliflower mashed potatoes and things like that?
Exactly, exactly, because that's going to pull over more to the 50% non-starchy vegetables. You still get that feel that you're getting potatoes. And if anybody hasn't tried riced cauliflower as a replacement for rice or even mashed potatoes, it's a
Hmm.
great thickener in soups. Really try it. I encourage everybody to try it. You can either rice your own just by getting a head of cauliflower
Okay.
and cooking it down and mashing it up however you want to with a ricer or a blender or two knives. Or, crazy as this sounds, I found that the frozen cauliflower is less expensive than buying the head of cauliflower.
Huh.
So I'll just
Interesting.
try to, yeah.
So in terms of like frozen things and other types of food, what's the difference between like whole foods and processed foods?
So whole foods are close to the source, close to the ground. A, a banana is a whole food. It's not much processing to it. A processed food are those things that they've done something to before they present it to the public, like the cereals, the cereal aisle. When you look at the ingredient list, there's more ingredients than just the item itself. What I mean by that is, if I look at the Quaker Oats oatmeal drum,
Mhm.
the ingredient is oats. But if I look at the ingredients in Lucky Charms, it might start with enriched whole wheat, but then it goes on to all the flavorings and all the colorings and all the preservatives, and that becomes that processed food. There's another shade of the term processing, though, that isn't bad. Again, it still means doing something to the food before we get it to the public, but it's a good thing. And the example here is the salads that you buy packaged. So all you have to do is open up the package and pour it in the bowl.
Okay.
You're not just getting the head of romaine or the head of butter leaf. They've actually washed it, shredded it, mixed it with other leaves, and that's processing.
Okay.
But you can eat it much easier. So that kind of processing is good because that's going to get you to eat more salad than if you had to go through all the work. Another processed food we find in the meat aisle, the meat freezer section, the fajita chicken, where
Okay.
there's a bag of chicken where they've already seasoned it, they've grilled it or roasted it, and they've diced it, and you buy the bag that you can just pour on a salad ready made. You don't have to go buy raw chicken breast, season it, grill it, cut it, freeze it. It's processed. And so that processing is actually a good thing.
Okay, so when you go to the grocery store, what are some tips and tricks that people can think of to eat healthy? I've heard this thing said that if you stick to like the outsides of a grocery store, that's where the fresher, uh, healthier for you things are, and then the things that tend to be worse for you are in like the center aisles of a store.
Right. Yes, I would agree with that. And I would say not as good for you instead of worse for you
Okay.
because everything in moderation. I mean, I don't know. When I was a kid and we went on field trips, I would love it when my mom would buy the Twinkie for the field trip lunch. That was the
Right.
only time we ever got Twinkies, and that was okay. If you think about the Twinkie as a food, though, there's nothing redeeming from a nutritious standpoint about a Twinkie, except it
Right.
tastes really good. Um, so everything's in moderation. To your question, the outside of the store is where you're going to find those fresher, cleaner eating, closer to the ground, closer to the source foods. We
Okay.
have another slide you can pull up, Kat. It's going to show us the yogurt one first, if you would. It's going to show us ingredients. And so, how do we choose what's a healthy ingredient? So, this is Kellogg's Crave, and you're going to always find an ingredient list underneath the nutrition fact panel. So, just to visit a little bit the nutrition fact panel, all of those numbers, those grams of total fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbs, protein, those are all what is in the serving size listed on that fact panel. So that's just product information for the serving size. The
Okay.
serving size isn't necessarily good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. It's just product information for that amount. Those percentages, so total fat, we're looking at 9%, saturated is 8%. That is completely based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet. It is not what's in the serving. It is based off of a 2,000 calorie a day diet. So those percentages are used if we're going to compare labels. So if I have 2 spaghetti sauces and I'm trying to keep my sodium level down, and the serving size is the same, but the percentage of sodium is 3% in one and 15% in the other, it's a no-brainer. Go for the 3%.
Right, because then you can have more of something else later.
Right. So now let's come back down because we started to talk about how can we identify cleaner, wholer foods. And if we go to that ingredient list, these ingredients are listed, all ingredient lists are listed in order of weight, not amount, in order of weight. So the most weight in this product, in the serving size, is the chocolate flavored filling, which then has its own ingredient list right there, of which the highest weight is sugar. So if I'm looking at ingredient lists and I'm trying to eat close to the source, I want to look for products that maybe have 5 or fewer ingredients. Think about a banana. Single ingredient products don't need a label by law. But if a banana had a nutrition fact panel, the only ingredient on it would be
banana.
And an apple?
Just apple.
And a potato?
Potato.
Potato. And back to the oats. But once we start to get more and more processed, then our ingredient list gets longer and longer. So if you're looking for healthier foods, look for 5 or fewer ingredients. If there's, more than 5, then use your judgment. Make sure you recognize what they are. Make sure that it's not just words that you have no idea what they are. Some of them is like anti-clumping agents and things like that, but we're just looking for fewer ingredients. The other thing before we go off this picture here, the other thing I want to point out is that when I'm looking at this ingredient list, sugar is the highest by weight. But then when I keep reading through, then I see sugar again before the whole grain oat flour. And then I see brown sugar syrup.
It's quite a lot of sugar.
So I've got, yeah. And legally, we get away with it because it's different ingredients, different weights. So sometimes we just have to think about, what's the total? And then that brings you back up to the nutrition fact panel, where when I look at total carbs, do you see fiber and sugars?
Yes.
Underneath the total carbs?
Yep, over to the right there.
Yeah, Kat, go to the next slide that shows the boxes, because this is an older nutrition fact panel.
Okay, let's see if I can bring that up quickly here. Everything reset when we went live. There we
right
go.
here. So the box on my left, the blue box,
Hmm.
okay, is an older fact panel. The brown box is a newer fact panel. So let's take a minute and look at that. The serving size is 1 bar of whatever this is. Total carbs are 23. Go down to fiber and total sugars are indented and lighter. They're included in total carbs. When I go to total sugars, I now have includes 5 grams added sugar. That's also indented. So the added sugar is included in the total sugar. So if we
Okay.
go back to what we saw with all those sugars, it included the natural sugar, like fruit has natural sugar, milk has natural sugar, vegetables have natural sugar,
Okay.
and it includes those added sugars that you see in that ingredient list. So, from a goal standpoint, added sugars, our goal should be to eat foods with 0 added sugars.
Okay. So more of the natural sugars.
Right. So, what is an added sugar? Kat, have you ever made an apple pie?
I have, yes.
So, what's your recipe for the filling?
Apples. It's been a while, but sugar, brown, cinnamon. Um,
Right. And you cook it all down, right?
right.
So, those apples have natural sugar, but we feel obligated to add white sugar.
Right.
That's the added sugar. So, here's a tip. If
Okay.
you're making a cobbler or an apple pie, just use 3 different types of apples, 2 or 3 different types of apples, and it will be sweet enough and you won't need any added sugar.
Huh, that's an interesting tip.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
So did that answer your question enough, or how are we picking foods? What are we looking for?
We're looking for things that are, 5 ingredients or less, things that are missing the added sugars, uh, and as close to the source as possible is the best.
You're on it.
Yeah. So I know there's other factors that can lead to a cancer diagnosis, whether that's genetics or in predisposition. But why is it so important to eat healthy uh, to in your diet?
Yeah, that too is a great question. Um, we all have genetics. We all have heredity. We could have heart disease in our family. We could have cancer in the family. We could have um, arthritis in the family, but nothing says that we have to turn those cells on, those genetically disposed cells to those medical conditions on. So they might turn on even if we have the healthiest of eating and the healthiest of lives. Don't misread this. They might turn on anyway. But if we can eat healthy and feed our cells the healthiest way possible, we might be able to delay or prevent them from expressing themselves. So if I have diabetes or cancer in my family and I eat healthy most of my life, most of the time, then I have a better chance of not expressing that cancer. It used to be that we didn't see cancers until old age, 70, 80, and now we're seeing cancers much, much younger. Um, there might be lots of reasons for that. It's not this kind of forum to come up with why that is,
Right.
but the point being that those cells do not have to express themselves. So if we can eat healthy and nutritious as often as possible, as early as possible, then we have a better chance of living a healthier, longer life.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to open it up to some questions out there for the people that are watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. As of right now, I just have the one that about what are your thoughts about sugar from Sandy, and we covered that a little bit. But what you mentioned when we talked earlier about good sugars and bad sugars.
Yeah.
What are some other kinds of good sugars?
So the good sugars are those sugars that have nutrients like maple syrup, um, honey, even the beet sugar, the cane sugar, the table sugar that we have.
Mm-hmm.
The issue and the natural sugars that come in fruit and vegetables and milk, the natural sugars that are in our foods. Those are those healthy sugars. We should not be afraid of those.
Okay.
The question really comes in because we are a culture, we've become a culture that we feed our taste buds instead of feeding our machine. And so sugar, salt, and fat are highly addictive.
Right.
And so when we eat sugar, it becomes a very feel good kind of ingredient. And so we're looking for more.
Okay.
So same with salt, same with fat. So if we can cut back on sugar, then the taste buds follow suit, and we can start to taste the natural sugars in green beans and strawberries. And then we don't need to add sugar to the strawberry or sugar to the apples for the apple pie filling.
Okay.
So good sugars are those natural sugars. Would never be afraid of the natural sugar. The sugars where you should watch some caution are
Mhm.
those added sugars. And thankfully, these new nutrition fact panels are showing us
What is
where the added sugars are.
awesome? Another question I have is good fats versus bad fats. You hear a lot about like the avocado is a good fat. So, what are some more examples? Like, what is the difference between that?
So I have to answer this in a couple different levels.
Okay.
Fat is fat.
Right.
Fat has the same amount of calories no matter what kind of fat it is. Fat is fat. However, the structure of fat makes it healthier or unhealthier. So we hear about olive oil being a really good fat. Olive oil is considered a good fat because it's considered unsaturated, which just means that it's got more flexibility in the system, in the chemistry of it. It's
Okay.
not saturated. Okay. So then we hear of saturated fats being unhealthy. So saturated fats are solid at room temperature. The butter, the lard, coconut. Okay, saturated fats. Those are the ones that you should use cautiously. I'm not going to say that you should cut butter out of your diet because butter has some good nutrients in it. However, you shouldn't use excessive amounts of butter and only use butter, right?
Mhm.
Unsaturated fats are those fats that are liquid at room temperature, being olive oil, canola, sesame oil.
Okay.
So, in my estimation, I would love to see people eat a wide variety of fats because they all offer something different. Don't just stick to one, but
Okay.
generally, the unsaturated, the liquid oils are better in the long run than the saturated fats if you're going to eat the same amount of any of them. So you can have them all, just go easier on the saturated.
Okay. I have a question about from uh, where'd it go? Teresa, that is, are frozen dinners bad for you?
No. And
Okay.
yes. No, because if that's the processing that you need to
Mhm.
get a meal, if your choice is to eat a frozen dinner that has meatloaf, potatoes, and green beans, or eat popcorn, I
Right.
want you to eat the frozen meal.
Okay.
However, when you're picking frozen meals, then look for a couple things. Look for low sodium. They are notoriously high in sodium because the chefs that are making them need them to add flavor so that you come back and keep eating them.
Okay.
So they're really high in sodium for the most part. So go for lower sodium. And the other thing is that in 90, I'm pulling a number out of the air here, 98% of the cases, they don't have enough vegetables.
Okay.
So whenever I suggest, especially the people that are struggling to get in balanced meals, I say, go ahead and do those, look for the low sodium, but always make vegetables. always have a salad, always microwave or roast or steam broccoli or green beans or cauliflower so that your plate becomes balanced. Serve that frozen meal
Mhm.
on a plate. Cook it, but then scoop it out, serve it on a plate, balance it out, make it look pretty. There's a lot to be said for when we enjoy our food, when we eat mindfully, we're actually absorbing the nutrients. We are not stressed about the eating, we're eating mindfully, and it's actually better for the body. We eat less in the long run.
Okay.
So cook the frozen meal, serve it on a plate, add more vegetables, maybe a fruit for dessert.
Perfect. Okay, what about things like frozen fruits and frozen vegetables in general versus fresh and frozen fruits?
Right. Frozen fruits often are flash frozen in the field. So when they are flash frozen in the field, they actually have more nutrients because they're picked at their peak of ripeness.
Okay.
So they are ripe and they are getting picked and they are frozen and you find them in the freezer section. What you find in the produce aisle, unless it's locally grown, locally sourced, or a farmer's market,
Mm-hmm.
what you're finding there are things that are picked before they're ripe, put on a truck, shipped, so that when you see them, now they're ripe.
Okay.
So I would say that many times frozen might be, and again, unless you're eating locally or farmer's market or your own backyard garden, yay! um, or the hospital garden, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, Frozen fruits and vegetables are very nutritious and no salt is added like it's added in cans.
Oh, great. Okay, what about things like tofu and soy? Are, how do those affect your health, and are they good as like substitutes for uh, meats and things like that?
So tofu is it's made from
Mm-hmm.
soybeans, and it's one of those foods that are high in protein, and it takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking it with.
Okay.
So if you've never cooked with tofu, I really suggest you try it. You unpackage it, you drain it, you squeeze it out, and then you saute it in whatever you want, some kind of sauce or bake it or something like that. Tofu comes in a lot of different textures. You've got silken tofu, you've
Mm-hmm.
got soft, you've got firm, and you've got extra firm. That firm and that extra firm, there's a lot of ways to prepare it where you can use it as in a stir fry, like instead of chicken, you're getting that same texture that you would in chicken, not the same flavor, but the same texture.
Uh-huh.
If you use silken, there are a lot of recipes out there where you can make it into a chocolate pudding because it's that smooth and it picks up the flavor of the cocoa and the peanut butter you could add. So lots of different textures. So if you've never tried tofu, I encourage you to try it. And
Okay.
if you've tried it and you're not sold on it, then maybe try a different texture. Maybe try it with these kind of ideas where you have to squeeze it out to soak up. It takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking it in.
Right.
So I also know the second half of that question is what do I think about the soy that's with that,
Uh-huh.
especially when we're talking about a cancer topic. And anything in moderation is fine. If you're going to eat it in extremes,
Mm-hmm.
as if anything, it's not healthy.
Okay.
So there's nothing wrong with soy.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, that seems to be all the questions that everybody submitted right now. Thank you for joining us this week, and I'm looking forward to next week when we talk about, cancer or nutrition and getting nutrition during cancer, both for a patient and the caregiver, because those are both really important things for everybody to learn. So that's going to be next week's topic. But yeah, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Kat. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. If we didn't get to your question today, we will definitely get to it next week. Or if you have a question that you don't know, you come up with later on, please send those to me either on our Facebook page or to our email account, which is witsendcommunityplace@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you next week.